Welcome to StormCast, the official Warhammer Age of Sigmar podcast. Hello and welcome to StormCast, the official Warhammer Age of Sigmar podcast, brought to you 3 short times per week instead of one proper show by the Warhammer Age of Sigmar community team. This week we'll be talking with lead cartography artist James Diesel Jameselton. Welcome back. Please join us for our next segment, where we talk to lead cartography artist James Diesel Jameselton. Welcome back. We are joined today with lead cartography artist James Diesel Jameselton. So James, just how awesome are the Mortal Realms?
So awesome.
That's all the time we have. Welcome back. Hey guys, thanks for watching. Boy, it sure was fun talking at length with James about how awesome the cartography of the Mortal Realms were. Be sure to follow us on our official Warhammer Age of Sigmar Facebook page, as well as Warhammer community website. Thanks very much. You have just listened to StormCast, the official Warhammer Age of Sigmar podcast. Sorry. So I often do a parody of somebody else's podcast intro. This time it was StormCast, the official podcast, and it went so well that I gave it its own video, but I reused it here. And if you think that's too much, well, fuck you. I like it. Anyway, welcome to the show. Mini Junkie asks, how did I do the set? And I said I'd talk about it on the next episode, so here we are. Well, I own a green screen and some lights. So, all I really have to do is get the foreground and then get the background. I can put myself in the middle. Easy. So take a screen cap of their podcast at full screen. Photoshop, cut out the foreground, including the mics. Don't have to take too much time because it's a parody after all. Done. They're using, official art for the background wallpaper, so I just have to find that. Google for 5 seconds, found StormCast versus Nighthaunt. Just ship that in the background. So we got the background, got the foreground, now we just need me in the middle. So, sit in a folding chair in front of a green screen, get the lighting right. And by right, I mean wrong, because it seems like they only have 2 lights here instead of 3, and it's a 2-shot anyway, and that's already a little sketchy. Would it kill these guys to use a Kino for an official company podcast? I don't know. The lighting is just really weird and bad for the podcast. Look over here on his face. Way too hot on the left side of his face. He looks like Neapolitan ice cream with just like bright and then a dark strip and then the other thing on the side. This guy looks like he's lit straight from the top. His backlight is more like a spotlight. It's coming from directly above his head and it's too hot. Loaded up in the Premiere, chroma key out, and just some finishing touches. I had to desaturate everything because their color correction was off. And yeah, I think it looks, I think it turned out perfectly fine for a parody video. It was fun. Also, you don't have to say welcome back every time you cut. You didn't go anywhere. That's the magic of cinema. Doing the announcer guys totally over the top, trying way too hard intro and outro was incredibly fun. Put a little Orgrim Doomhammer in there. You have just listened to StormCast. Like it's World of Warcraft. Stay tuned for episode 2, maybe. There's still plenty to make fun of. As for list of the week, well, we don't know everything about 2nd edition or GHB 18 yet, but I thought I'd make a list that could have some fun with the new rules and the new way that people are probably going to play the game. This one's called Sportsmanship Score. It is a mixed order list. We have 2 Lord Celestins on Stardrake. Why, you ask? Well, let's get into it. Heroes are seemingly harder to snipe, and so people might be running more heroes. And especially little wizards. So let's kill them from anywhere on the board, every turn. With gigantic monsters. Lord Celestin on Stardrake has the ability called Lord of the Heavens, Reign of Stars. Roll a dice, and choose that many enemy units on the battlefield, then roll a dice for each. On a result of 4 or more, the unit is struck by a fragment of a falling star and suffers D3 mortal wounds. Everything else on the War Scroll is pretty good. We're not trying to make the Stardrake invincible like the 1 Stardrake StormCast lists. We are trying to rain mortal wounds down on the whole table every turn. So this could really punish people using 100-point heroes or little wizards and trying to get synergies out of it by just doing 2d3 mortal wounds to them from anywhere on the table over and over the entire game. Lord Zelstland on Stardrake is pretty hard to kill just himself, and when you have two, it can be a real problem. Everything else in the list is just random good stuff, who cares? A Hag Queen and 30 Witches to run up and just attack something. An Auric Runesmiter and 30 Volkite Berserkers to automatically capture an objective and just sit there scoring points the whole game while you rain stars down upon your enemy. And a bunch of Skinks to run around and hold home objectives or do whatever. The Hag Queen gives Battleshock immunity to the Witch Elves, and the Auric Runesmiter with Command and Trait Inspiring gives Battleshock immunity to the Volkite Berserkers. And so you're resistant to that. All in all, I'm sure you'll get a high sportsmanship score with this very fun interactive list. So I was on Warhammer Weekly last week. It was sweet. I thought it went well. I was a replacement for some other person who canceled at the last minute. But even still, it was totally enjoyable. I thought it went okay. I probably could have spoke to chat a little bit more. Like, the longer the episode went for, the more I realized I was too much like Vince, at least like interest-wise. So, for instance, in the show, I'm talking about game design, which he's done videos on. And then in the course of the show, I mentioned choice paralysis, and he's like, oh yeah, I did a video on that. And I talk about the 3 psychographic profiles, and he's like, oh yeah, I did a video on that. And I'm like, well, they added 2, Vorthos and Mel. And he's like, oh yeah, I did a follow-up video adding those 2. And he did a video on the philosophy of game design, which is what I was there to talk about. I talk about cognitive fallacies and mental pitfalls, He did a video on that. I mentioned the Time of Troubles and Drow Elves. When the show ended, we talked for like an hour, me, him, and Tom, about Palladium Rifts and how awesome of a game it is. And we talked about Kevin Simbedia, how much of a dick that guy is. It was great. And different styles of GMing and stuff. I suppose as a friendship, we hit it off. But from a viewer perspective of somebody who's maybe watched all of his stuff, it might have seemed a little repetitive. Just because our interests line up so well, I suppose. But for people who hadn't heard, me before and were at least quasi-new to Warhammer Weekly, I'm sure it was fine. The comments seem to be positive, so that's great. I went back and looked at some of the live comments from the show to answer some questions. The Red Wizard asked me, and he's probably trolling, can Nethervoid be competitive in Legacy? And the answer is no, it can't. There's a card called Trinisphere, and if you want to be doing what Nethervoid is doing, you're probably not going to be in black, you're going to be in red. It's doing pretty well in Legacy right now, one of those all-in red prison decks with Soul Lands and Lotus Petals and some fast mana, Immune Spirit Guides, into turn 1 Chalice, turn 1 Trinisphere, turn 1 Blood Moon. So Nethervoid itself, probably not, but a strategy like it certainly can, and is. It's just in a different color. That being said, if you want to pay 4 at sorcery speed for some sort of big effect, you probably just want to win anyway, like paying 4 for sneak attack or paying 4 for Allurin or something. Oh, and about rolling for priority, I misspoke. Winning ties versus +1, they're not technically the same. Mathematically, they're just close enough. So, corrections. So they tossed this one at the bottom of the Soul Wars announcement, but it's actually kind of a big deal, I think. And it's how the change in scenery rules for terrain work. Right off the bat, they've tightened up how far away from the terrain you need to be to get the bonuses or penalties. They used to be 3 inches for all of them, now they're 1 inch. And they've softened the polarization of them. I know this is a big thing that I tend not to like in AoS, and they seem to be reining it in. The single die rolls that probably matter too much individually. Damned used to be at any time during the hero phase. They've changed that. At the start of your hero phase, you can pick 1 friendly unit within 1 inch of a damned terrain feature to make a sacrifice. If you do, unit suffers D3 mortal wounds, but you can reroll hit rolls of 1 until your next hero phase. So this is a huge nerf from +1 to hit rolls. Also, since it only works at the start of your hero phase and it's only one unit, this kills the combo. Bloodmarked Warband, Khorne, quote-unquote infinite Blood Tithe engine is dead, and I'm sad, I suppose, but in another way, it would just not have been okay. So I'm happy they got in front of it, because it would have just required an FAQ. Like, it would have just had to get changed. Arcane, add 1 to casting on unbinding rolls for wizards while they're within 1 of arcane terrain features. Pretty much the same except for 3 inches. Inspiring, same thing. Deadly's been changed to roll a dice for each unit that finishes a normal move or a charge move within 1 inch of deadly terrain. On a 1, the unit suffers D3 mortal wounds. This is very different. It used to be per model, so it was much more deadly. And you would get it for running or charging, but this is normal move or charge. It's possible we could see a slight change to Sylvaneth Wildwoods as well because of this. Currently, Wildwoods don't slay monster or hero models, and if it's reduced to just a few mortal wounds, possibly, then it'll start to affect those as well. So, you know, a little bit of a nerf, a little bit of a buff, just different. At Adepticon, Andrew lost his 5th round because Archaon rolled a 1 on deadly terrain, so I'm sure he's thrilled about that. Mystical, roll a dice each time you allocate a wound or mortal wound to a model within 1 of mystical terrain. On a 6, the wound or mortal wound is negated. This is a big change. Mystical, I bet, was one of the main reasons why so many players didn't like the terrain rules, is because it was so anti-fun. The bonus you got from it was so overpowered. Rerolling fail wounds is so huge. And the majority of the time it would go off. It's on a 2 to 6. And so you pretty much should always be going for it. But then you have this roll a 1 and your unit doesn't do anything for 1 or 2 turns. It was just so brutal when you rolled the 1. Like it would lose you games, like not to be able to move on to an objective or something with it. And Sinister was just an awkward kind of rule. Like it made the unit cause fear later in the turn, and it was kind of awkward. So Sinister is now just the opposite of Inspiring, which is balanced. The positives and negatives you get from the terrain are just much less game-breaking than they were before. And I think that's a good thing here. For once, here's a nerf that I'm happy with. Also, some Thomas Lyons 2.0 rumors leaks. At the end of each turn, you will lose as many models as it takes to return that unit to coherency. This is actually a big deal. I don't know how common this was in your games, but in mine, it was very common. So the rules of the game, as they currently are, oblige you to string your units out in lines within a certain range of objectives, within a certain range of command ability, circles, within a certain range of terrain. And so naturally when you start taking casualties, sometimes it becomes just a better play to take casualties out of the middle of those strands, just accepting that you'll never be able to move that unit again. As long as there's one guy still within range and then the rest of them are way over here. This was a common tactic used most often with Fire Slayers or Undead or really anybody else. And, you know, a few of them will die, and so at the last possible moment you'll take that last one off so that on your turn you get to move again. And this largely turns off this mechanic, and it's probably for the better. While it was an interesting use of game mechanics to gain an advantage, it added to the obnoxiousness of how the game sometimes looks on the table. And it was really a failing of one of the main points of game design, which is the rules should oblige your players to play the right way and play the fun way. If the rules and, you know, really the right play is playing in an unfun way or in an ugly way, however you define that, then you failed in some way. And currently the rules are pushing us in a direction of playing in like the ugliest way, in a way, on the table. You know, these are not armies, it's just, you know, it's spaghetti strands stringing all over the place in ridiculous patterns. And to the casual observer, it's a very distasteful look on the battlefield. It doesn't look like armies fighting. It looks like synchronized swimming, right? And maybe that's fine for IDK, but for the game in general, I think the rules should push you in a direction, not too much, but more than it is now, of just properly looking forces fighting each other. It's also interesting you can kill a lot of your own guys on purpose this way, and currently brainstorming ways to abuse this. But there are some tricks you can pull, I think. More on that later. This is also a terrifying prospect for people like Star Drakes or some other, I mean, there aren't a lot, but there are some models in the game that can select individual models to kill. And so if you have someone strung out, you know, one deep in a line somewhere, and you gobble up two of the models in between, you can end up killing off, like, an incredible amount of half of them. And so I'm curious how they will fix that, or if that'll just be a feature, and if you're playing against something like that, it'll just be a huge risk to not clump up your guys. We'll see how that turns out. When a general dies mid-game, you will select a new one and select a new command trait for them, and they'll become the general. This is interesting. This, I'm not going to say it removes. Considering the command abilities that you're using as death throughout the game, your command abilities are excellent, and you're really going to want to be using them. And so spending your precious command points to bring a unit back is going to be a big cost. It's sort of an example of the more things change, the more things stay the same. How did you beat death before? You killed all the heroes. How do you beat death now? You kill all the heroes. It punishes you more for not doing it and rewards the death player or the corn player more for successfully putting you in a position where you're not able to. Okay, play the game. It opens up some interesting play experiences where you can actually run two heroes that require them to be the general, to use their abilities. And if one dies halfway through the game, you'll still have the opportunity to use the second one later on. You know, this is kind of a gamble. Who knows if they'll kill it, but, you know, it's Age of Sigmar. It's a very deadly game, and a lot of stuff dies. So, I actually think this is a cool change. It's intriguing. It's very interesting now. This changes list building in a very interesting way, and mostly I'm happy about it. And the way this interacts with the generic command abilities too, it's nice. Yeah, I'm excited for it. We have confirmation that command abilities can be used more than once. Okay. I figured that they could not, and that you would have to, you know, run two of the same guy if you wanted to use it, but I guess they thought that spending a command point was already a steep enough cost, and I think they're probably right about that. I think people will find the command points are really a very precious resource, and it'll be a steep cost to use one. You know, everyone's going crazy about all these spending a bunch of command abilities on the same turn combos, but I think moving forward, at least list building wise, it could be... I mean, command points are now a resource, so we have another resource in the game. And, you know, as a list builder, what do you like to do when they come out with a new resource? Well, you like to see what the game looks like when you're going all in on the new resource and seeing how to exploit, you know, as many as you can. But then also what you try to do is come at it a different way. And you're like, okay, so they've attached a resource to all of these abilities. Well, let's try to find some that maybe should be command abilities because they're strong, but they don't cost points. I'm thinking of Aether Chemists, I'm thinking of War Chanters, you know, guys with abilities that just automatically work, that are almost as good as command abilities. And, to be honest, way better than a lot of command abilities that exist elsewhere in the game. So, you know, maybe it's we're ushering in the era of the command ability combos, or maybe it's going to be more about what abilities you can find in your army lists that don't cost command points. And Balewind Vortex, nerfed to last. Balewind Vortex adds 6 inches and 1 additional spell per round to the wizard on it, not just the round they summon it. Wizards on it cannot have a wounds characteristic of more than 8. He says thus no Marathi, although that's wrong. Marathi has 6 wounds. She's on there just fine. Or an Eidolon, which is too bad. I definitely built lists with Eidolon of the Sea on top of the Balewind Vortex because spell range for Idoneth Deepkin is painfully short. Most of them are 12 inches. Enemies get to banish it on a 6-up in their own hero phase, but they must be a wizard, and it takes a casting attempt to do so. So, man, that's disappointing. It's really too bad that you can't spend an unbinding action to banish it. So people that don't have wizards but are good anti-magic, like Dispossessed, or the one... I can't remember what the Sky Fleet is for KO, but they have one where everybody gets to unbind, or, you know, Corn or something like that. These guys are pretty screwed against Balewind Vortexes and endless spells in general, so I'm sad to see that. Also, the wizard on top of there, okay, he gets +1 to saving throws, but the whole thing is considered one model now. And nowhere does it say they're immune to melee. So you can run up and you can actually kill this thing, which is great. So remember when I said they were screwed about it? Well, they're not too screwed. You just kill it, right? Easy. I'm glad they've changed this from doubling the spell range, because it was just ridiculous. It was ridiculous for two reasons. First, it lets God Summoners do 20 mortal wounds to you turn 1, which is completely unacceptable. Like, it made the best spells in the game oppressive. And it was probably fine for the majority of spells in the game, which is why a fixed point cost for it was wrong. Or was either way overcosted or way undercosted, depending on how you look at it, which was the second problem with it. When it just doubled the range of spells, you can't balance its points right, because depending on what's on top of it, that's either a good price or a bad price. Plus 6 inches is, I'm not going to say a common thing, but it's sprinkled throughout the game, and it's mostly fair. Clocking in at, I think, 40 points. This will, okay, so ironically, Balewind Vortex gets nerfed, and then now I think it'll be used by more armies, because 40 points is way too cheap. I mean, it went from the most overpowered bullshit terrain piece in the game, but it cost 100 points, which is that's a real amount of points, to definitely worse, but so cheap that you're a fool not to take it. Which, I mean, if they want to sell Balewind Vortexes, that's a way to do it. I mean, part of the reason why a lot of people weren't using it was the stigma over it. You were just a dick for using a Balewind Vortex. And, you know, that was sort of the sentiment for a large part of the community. And they weren't exactly wrong. So now maybe the stigma will be lessened for using this thing, and that, coupled with only costing 40 points, I think, yeah, paradoxically, this thing got hugely nerfed, and I think more people play with it now. So, isn't that weird how it turns out? I can already see the Idoneth Deepkin Balewind Vortex putting little sharks in there. Like, I can already see it. So they're taking all the match play scenarios from 2016 and 2017 and adding more and just bundling them up, tweaking them a little bit. Hopefully the auto capture with 20 or more models thing is gone, because clearly we don't need help pushing us in the direction of running massive regiments. They're already amazing enough. I don't think you need extra incentive to do it by having you auto capture stuff in some match play scenarios, especially since being elite and not having a lot of models is already a disadvantage in a lot of different ways in the game, with no real advantage, that I don't think you need like an extra downside on top of all that, with like having even more of a difficulty scoring points in match play scenarios. Monsters and war machines over 8 wounds will no longer gain bonuses to saves from cover. Okay, so they're not giving monster keywords to war machines and cauldrons and stuff, but we can safely assume that gaining bonus saves from cover because you're too huge probably disqualifies you from Lookout Sir as well. So, sorry, Celestial Hurricanum. It looks like they've closed that loophole before it came out, which is good. It shows some good foresight. As for the question that everybody asks, can Croak go on the Balewind Vortex? We will need an official answer. So, the mathematician in me says that an asterisk is not a wound characteristic. And so the answer for is an asterisk less than 8, it's undefined. It's like dividing by 0. It's not a proper answer, in other words. So really strictly, I would say no, but I'm sure they'll let him. Game balance wise, I think it's fine. It's a legitimate interpretation to say that he has a wounds value of less than 8, since it's a star, which could be considered 0, so I don't know. If I had to bet, I'd bet he can go on it.
Well, I guess obviously the L'Oreal's new modified soul and Four Eyes is pretty sweet, and I think she was a decent choice before, but she's definitely a lot better choice. I think before I definitely would have gone with like a Tree Lord Ancient and a Spirited Durthu, but now L'Oreal actually makes me think maybe I'll take her instead. I am really curious, since they changed her summoning, what the Branch Wraith's spell will become. Because as it was written, it's 2d6 Dryads within a Sylvaneth Wildwood something something. So maybe it's like the 10 like you thought. I wonder if they're going to change it to maybe just healing a unit. I'm not really sure. But I'm really curious to see how they change that. It'd be weird if they left it the same. You could just summon 2d6 Dryads like every turn. That would be weird.
It would be probably the only thing in the game, I think, that you can summon just a random amount of things as a baseline ability. It would just be strange.
Yeah, it would be really bizarre. I really want to know, since they're reworking other factions battalion like Beastclaw, they mentioned they got their point cost reduced. I wonder if those will be reworked at all for Sylvaneth or any other army for that matter. I mean, I guess if they don't rework it at all, it's not that big of a loss because, let's say, the Gnarl Root Wargrove is actually still pretty good, even for like a net cost of 250 points. Because you presumably you get command points and you get some artifacts with that. I'm not sure how they're changing all that stuff. I would like to see it so it's not tied to having a household battalion. Like, I really don't like battalions that require you to take other battalions. I kind of don't like that.
Yeah.
And then I guess finally the point cost reductions for Spirited Durthu and Kurnoth. I'd be interested to see how much those are. But I think any point cost reduction is of course welcome, especially for a Spirited Durthu, which is one of the Sylvaneth's like only hammer units, as far as I can tell. It seems like they have a lot more like Anvil or like weird specialist than they do actually just straight damage. Drycha and the Spirited Durthu being the exceptions, I guess.
Yeah. To hear that Kurnoth Hunters and Durthu went down, because if I had to choose two things in the army that are like, they're great, but their problem is they're too expensive, and so reducing points is the right choice. And that sounds like I'm being silly when I say something as formulaic as that. Like, the problem is they cost too much, and so the solution is to reduce their cost. But I specifically point that out because there's a lot of units in the game for a lot of armies whose problem is not that the thing is too expensive. There's actually just something critically wrong with it from a different angle.
Like Lotan.
Yeah, and then like reducing its cost isn't actually going to help anything because it's like it's broken in some way, in a bad way. Like, if you just make these things cheaper, it doesn't actually solve the inherent problem with them. And so, you know, an army that's really struggling because it has a bunch of problems in a few different specific areas, getting an extra 100 or 200 points in your army so that you can take like one more squad of 3 guys isn't actually going to change anything.
Right.
But like, you know, fixing a war scroll to make it playable instead of just sort of like outclassed by something else you play anyway, and so it's kind of the same. That's where the good stuff is. And I think actually with Sylvaneth, like the war scrolls are fine. It's just the costs are a little high, and especially with the battalion increases, which pretty much just robbed you of like 120 points out of your army, and then all the Kurnoths are 200, you know, are too expensive and stuff. So I actually hope the Kurnoths go down to what they were originally, like 180. Maybe even 160 now that they nerfed shooting a little bit. I think that's safe. And I wonder how far down Durthu can go. Because Durthu is not a spellcaster, and he doesn't have a command ability. And so he's actually pretty comparable to a Tree Lord Ancient from a what do I put in this slot of my army kind of respect.
If you went down 100 points, I'd be surprised. It would, of course, be welcome, but I would be surprised.
That's
I'm
a huge, yeah, 100 points is a huge amount to drop something. Usually they go like 20 points, maybe 40.
Yeah, I'm thinking in the 40 to 60 range at the most for him. If it's only 20, you might as well not even. I mean, my guess would be between 40 and 60.
Yeah, especially because you're taking one. You're not like, you know, deducting 20 points from Kurnoths can be a big deal because a lot of people take 3 units of them, so that adds up. But you're probably just taking 1 Durthu, and so you can afford to give it a bigger discount. If you had to choose, if there was like a rule where you could only play 1 Trent Giant in your army, you would take Tree Lord Ancient like probably 10 times out of 10.
Right.
Now I know that's not the great, you know, not a full-on comparison between 2 different units, but it is worth mentioning. Am I saying Durthu should be 300 points? No. But I don't think it would break the game if it was 320, 340. Like, if it cost the same amount as a Dragon Lord, he probably does more damage, but he doesn't fly. And he gets weaker when he's not near a Wildwood, and he doesn't cast spells, so, I don't know. I think it's fine. I hope he's going down a lot. If they cleaned up War Scrolls a little bit, what would you hope for? And I'm talking, like, as an example, it'd be nice if Kurnoth Hunters with swords weren't just strictly inferior to Kurnoth Hunters with scythes. There should be a little more of a choice there, I think.
Oh,
you know, stuff like that. Little tie up loose ends, you know, asymmetric wise.
I can't help but feel that there should be more going on with Tree Revenants and or Spite Revenants. I'm not really sure what the modification would be. Neither are bad, and they're very cheap for 5. It's 80 points. I don't know. I don't see too many lists that take more than 5 Tree Revenants when I just look around lists on the net and stuff, and I just wonder how people use them in that respect. Do they just go around killing other small units and capturing objectives? Or are they just there for like 80 points, here's my battle line, and then they do whatever they have to? I would like to see or know if people use larger size units and how they use them.
Yeah, I think that's what they're used for, is like, I want 80-point battle line instead of 100 just so I can, like, check boxes. And then only using 5. And you can find uses for 5. Dude, like, Spite Revenants, Tree Revenants are actually pretty cool. Like, their abilities are neat, and they can function as a little 5-man that gets to reroll a dice per turn, and they can teleport to board edges, even if they're not near Sylvaneth Wildwood. You can use them as an annoyance thing, where your opponent has to, like, let's say the cheapest unit nearby is like 160 points, and so he has to sit it on an objective, otherwise your Tree Revenants for 80 points are just going to, like, teleport over there and take it. And so it's sort of like, they can be used as a points trap, to trap points in places you want on your opponent's side. But I think mostly it's just like, I need a 3rd battle line and I want to save 20 points. And it'd be nice if they had a better use than that.
Yeah, and actually their way pipes, it is it is Wildwood or Edge.
Yeah, it's Wildwood.
It's either or. Oh, that's actually okay. Yeah, their martial memories is pretty cool. That once per phase you can reroll a single dice. This unit. Yeah,
that's actually awesome. Rerolling one of your charge dice during the charge phase, rerolling a save in the combat, rerolling Battle Shock, which is really cool. They're cool. Is it a single dice at all, so you can reroll, like, charging over deadly or something?
Yeah, it says once per phase you can reroll a single dice for this unit. This could be one of the dice you roll to see how far it charges, a hit roll, a save roll, a battle shock test, a roll to see whether a model is slain by deadly scenery, etc. Yep.
Cool. It actually says it. Yeah, and big units of them aren't exactly terrible. It's just hardly anyone does it because, well, you're just always strapped for points in Sylvaneth lists. And your heroes are so sick. And your elite troops are really good but expensive, so you just like don't have points to play with and experiment with stuff like that. Especially not with battalions costing what they do. And they talk about guy ran artifacts that you can take.
Oh yeah. Hyper Snare Seeds.
They both suck?
Yeah, they both. I'm not impressed. I'm really. I don't know. I guess I'm very I'm reserving judgment for the whole realm thing as in terms of artifacts, spells, and all that. I'd like to see how everything works before I cast any judgment, because some of the sneak peeks they've given aren't very impressive, and some certain items are more impressive, but still. I'm skeptical, I guess.
Yeah, especially as Sylvaneth, whose artifacts are phenomenal already.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like one of the better things about Sylvaneth as an army is that your artifacts are just sick, and you have like not only do you have just like one artifact that's so good, you have 2 or even 3. Like you're not powering down by taking the second or third artifact. You know, you're still just taking hot shit. You know, the 2 super defensive ones for your behemoths, or like the thing that increases casting range by 6 inches. I really like that one. The seed that you can give a branch witch, so like once a game she can summon a wildwood, you know, on top of everything else you did. Like your artifacts are just super good.
Yeah. There's no like weirdo time ones like there are in so many other war tomes or battle tomes. It seems like it. Everybody just seems to have like goofy, strange artifacts that end up not being very good. I'm looking at you, IDK.
Yeah. IDK artifacts are not very impressive.
No, there's a few that look fun and interesting, but for the most part, it's a weird situational bonuses that or penalties or whatever once per battle things you can do, and it's just underwhelming.
Yeah, I mean it's like, oh, here's your artifact list. Here's an artifact you can take that choose a weapon on your hero that's not a mount, you know, and that weapon gets +1 damage. Like, in no world is this even close to as good as, like, -1 to hit, just flat, you know. Ideally, in the perfect world, that's fine, because an army could be balanced around, like, okay, your other stuff is good, but your artifacts aren't so hot, and this army has awesome artifacts. And so awesome artifact armies tend to behoove you to take battalions so that you can get them and stuff, and it moves you in different directions list building wise. I'm sure it was by accident and mostly arbitrary though, but in a perfect world it would have been a very purposeful balancing choice. Yeah, in summary, I said I was excited about Sylvaneth from their faction focus. I mean, they didn't say much because they don't say much in any of these, but you know, depending on what Alarielle ends up costing, obviously if she just goes up 200 points, then okay, it's no good, right? But, you know, if she stays even close to what she used to cost, plus the summoning thing, and the 2 most overpriced units in your army just went down, and they were guys you wanted anyway, okay, yeah, I'm excited.
Yeah, I am too. And I'm actually curious, maybe because I have a vested interest, but I'm really curious how like the other mechanics work. Like you pointed out, the branch witch and the branch wraith. I really want to know more about all that. Yeah.
Dispossessed. I'm excited about it. I thought it was a great faction focus. In a similar vein to Sylvaneth, their main problem was really like a lot of their units were just hugely overpriced for no reason. And coupled with the meta buff that they'll be receiving, since Rune Lords are so good already, and you're already playing like 3, possibly even 4 of them in armies, the 30-inch Unbind and everybody trying to cast spells is actually like a buff for you. Because you have like 3 or 4 Rune Lords at +2 to unbind with 30-inch range. And now you're going to have Iron Breakers as battle line, and getting cheaper, who have a 5-up spell save. So people dipping their toe into cinematic magic without bonuses to cast are just going to get grounded to paste. The Dispossessed have received some very welcome point reductions across a wide range of units, from Longbeards to Iron Breakers and even Iron Drakes, which is great. Iron Breakers and Iron Drakes were both like way too expensive for what they did. Longbeards were already awesome and very well, like, I thought Longbeards were kind of a deal before, and so if they're getting cheaper, I'm pleased. Because I play them in mixed order, so if I'm getting extra points for free with dudes I'm already playing, then sweet. And massive regiments of Longbeards getting cheaper is gonna be real fucking good on the table. I'm excited. It's sweet. It's a good time to be a Dispossessed player at last. Finally. That Ancestral Pickaxe is, you know, just getting better and better now that you can run huge long amounts of Longbeards and Iron Drakes and stuff. Hammers are still quality. Yeah, it's great. Unfortunately, you know, the fly in the ointment, I suppose, is when they talk about allies, because it typically means they couldn't be bothered to make your army, like, varied and balanced enough to have a decent, you know, amount of choices for units. And so they're like, you should ally in some Karadan Overlords, since all you do is, since you're really slow, you should ally in fast flying people. And, you know, it sucks to hear about allies in your faction focus, because it's supposed to be about dwarves, and they're telling you to play something else.
Right.
But they're exactly correct. I think, like, a Dispossessed army with exactly 400 points of Skywardens is legit now. So, on one hand, it kind of sucks to talk about other dudes in the Your Dudes section, but that being said, they're actually quite correct. KO just kind of, like, fits perfectly in Dispossessed and solves their problems. Although, side note, so would Ironweld Arsenal, the half that are purely piloted by dwarves and built by Dispossessed in the lore anyway. But just saying. Just saying that should just be part of the army. Faction focus grots, I don't care. They're silly. That's nice. Some people like that.
I was sort of surprised that they did one, but maybe there's some diehard Goblin fans out there.
There are real grot fans in the world. Faction focused Bonesplitterz was funny. I laughed. The people they get to interview just sound so clueless half the time that it's annoying sometimes. And so, like, what are your top tips for Bonesplitterz players? And Sarah's like, don't forget about your ranged troops. While it's tempting to unleash the Waaagh and just charge straight into your enemy, there is another way. I think the chances are good that Bonesplitterz players might not even realize there are melee units in their entire army. Because everyone just takes a Cunning Ruck and has a million arrow boys. Like, that is the way that they are played, that's the way they're intended to be played, and that's the way they've only been playing. For the entirety of Age of Sigmar. It's just you take a million arrow boys and shoot a million arrows. So maybe they're trying to, like, point a hyper new person towards, like, you know, how to really play the army, but man, faction focus on your community site for changes in 2nd edition, that's not a place someone stumbles to when they don't even know, like, what an army does. I don't think, but, you know, maybe I'm wrong. And they talk about how much savage magic you have, which is actually a lot. It's surprising. You have a surprising amount of magic and good spells and great synergies and shamanism and stuff in this army. Like, they look like naked prehistoric orcs that are really, really stupid looking, but they have surprising magical prowess and synergies. They're very strong. Currently, they're by far the best army in all of Destruction, for instance. Like, competitively, nothing even comes close. It's just that they're annoying to play, and everyone hates playing against them, and that keeps... And their models look really stupid, and those three things keep a lot of people from them, I think. If they looked cool, I could see liking their playstyle, though.
Yeah, and their models, for the most part, you're right, do look pretty bad. I think their ground foot guys with like melee weapons actually look decent, but everybody else, it's pretty rough.
And at last, we get to Beastclaw Raider faction focus. I'm sad. There's some funny stuff in here. Warhammer Community's Nick is one of the hardworking moderators behind our Facebook pages, and thus is no stranger to the feeling of being endlessly pursued by an icy, crushing wave of death. This is funny. That's a great opening. So it had me on their side from turn one. But then they're like, after having volunteered to take part in White Dwarf's latest A Tale of Four Gamers, Nick had amassed a considerable collection of Beastclaw Raiders, and he's learned a thing or two on the way. So it's like, they couldn't find anyone in their office that actually plays this army, and so the only person they could find was a community Facebook moderator who started the army a month ago. So not exactly a ringing endorsement for like people in GW really pushing for this army, or really understanding it in any meaningful way.
They're basically that police officer from the Big Lebowski. Telling you that they have guys working around in shifts.
Yeah.
Trying to make
we'll get right on it. We got them working in shifts.
He's just cackling away.
Yeah.
In his face. Maybe
we'll find some leads. Just laughing. You know, the tips are just like comically bad. Like, it's like, what are your top tips for Beastclaw Raiders? Well, you should charge. You should charge as much as you can, and as soon as you can. They're at their best by far on the charge. And, you know, you have to choose your fights, though, because you get bogged down in lengthy combats. They can really do you damage, and you know, you could really end up losing. But having said that, you have no opportunity for counterplay, so I guess you just have to charge. There isn't much in the game that a Frostlord on a Stonehorn can't kill with relative ease. I wonder what game this guy's playing. Oh, do I wish that were true. Yeah. This is not true. 280 points of skeletons will kill a Stonehorn. Like it's over. What advice would you give to new Beastclaw Raiders players? Well, your whole army is 3 kits, so I guess just buy a bunch of those. Nice. In the new edition, first, the great news. Beastclaw Raiders have some considerable points reductions across the board. All Thundertusk and Stonehorn units now cost a decent chunk less, allowing you to fit more into your army lists. While several War Scroll battalions have likewise been discounted, making grabbing command points even easier. So I made a video about how you can't fix this with just reducing points. And so I suppose my opinion is probably well documented on that. And if they're just reducing the points, then I see no hope moving forward. Considering how the game is changing and what other armies are getting, I'm thinking like maybe 100 per. But we'll just have to see what kind of like War Scroll and command trait and stuff changes happen. And Allegiance kits. Like, we'll just see. It's a good start. I wish they would talk more. They're like, your 2 monsters are less expensive, as well as some battalions. And then they just start talking about spells.
Yes.
And my army does not have spellcasters in it.
Right, you have to ally.
It's like, you should ally in a single caster for 140 points. Like, eh. But if you don't fancy mucking around with sorcery, you just want to make your Frostlords on Stonehorn really good, you can use one of the generic artifacts that everyone are getting. Like, okay, so it's not really like, you know, unique to us then. It's just like, everyone are getting more artifacts. And so since yours are terrible, you can use the ones that everybody else gets. Doesn't exactly make me feel great. Combined with the Stonehorn, the Stone Skeleton ability, which halves the damage characteristic of all weapons that target this model, as well as having the number of mortal wounds this model suffers from a spell or ability. This is going to make you nigh impervious to damage. Well, it's too bad that they specifically called out Stone Skeleton and listed the entire rules for it to make sure that you knew that it was not going to be unnerfed and it would remain fucking terrible. So I'm sad about that. Finally, the Thunder Tusk is awesome for a long-range sniper, but they're still basically rendered impotent just about the first time they take damage, and since that's the only thing they can do, kind of left in the same spot I was before. Furthermore, Lookout Sir doesn't benefit them because they're a monster, so just as easy to plink down as before. So I'm not feeling it. And that also makes me sad because I was hoping that would get changed as well. In summary, your army is still brutally powerful, except now you get more for your points, and you've got some new tricks and tools to play with. I know this is sort of like trying to sell you on the army, but when your army is like, you know, 4-way tie for the worst in the whole game, like, saying that it's still, like, really good is a little, sounds a little sarcastic at this point. So, yeah, I'm still saying stuff like, well, you know, they could still do, you know, the new Army Allegiance rewrites. They could still change some war scrolls and stuff, but I got really excited about a bunch of other armies when I read their faction focuses, so if the faction focus was meant to get you excited about the faction that you play, Beastclaw Raiders failed.